The conduit of Anio Novus has a total length of 58,700 paces, 49,300 paces of underground channel, 9,400 paces above ground. Of the latter, 2,300 paces are on substructures or arches at various points in the upper part of its course, near the city, from the 7th milestone. There are 609 paces on substructures, 6,491 paces on arches. These are very high arches, rising at certain points to 109 feet. With these grand structures, so numerous and indispensable, carrying so many waters, who, indeed, would compare the idle pyramids or other useless, although renowned, works of the Greeks? Your Highness, the divine ruler of Hispania, slayer of heathens and bedder of kin, I have made a discovery. And need money, lots of money, please and thank you. Oh, and what is this discovery, Christopher Columbus? The Earth. Is round. The Greeks discovered the Earth was round like 2,000 years ago, you fucking dingus. Everyone with an education during the Middle Ages is well aware that the Earth is round, and we also know its rough circumference, and, something about mitochondria too, I think. Where were you educated? American public schools. Sure, that makes sense. Anyway, what did you need the money for? Well, you know how the Portuguese have begun sailing around Africa to get to China and India for spices? Because Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Empire, and who the fuck wants to give Muslims any money? Well, my calculations have shown that if I sail directly west, I will arrive at India, and only you will arrive a corpse. Huh? Eratosthenes, a Greek man, measured the size of the Earth using a series of obelisks that he placed along the Nile in Egypt. Measuring these shadows showed to him that the Earth was not only round, but also allowed him to extrapolate the size of the Earth. It is these measurements, taken almost 2,000 years ago, that are the reason people in this time understand that the Earth is round, and also that it's big. Too big. You will die at sea. However, you have no idea how boring it is to be king. I spend all my time trying to produce an heir with my cousin. Her jaw doesn't close, man. It's gross. So, I sorta wanna check your bullshit and give you money just for the hell of it. But, I mean, promise you won't get offended? Sure. You seem like a real dipshit. What makes you think that you're smarter than one of the most famous mathematicians to ever live? I am Catholic. This video is sponsored by Mountain Dew. Really, it's the only thing keeping me from just... This eraser I bought off Wish fucking sucks. Civilization is a lot like gay sex. In that, of course, while the Greeks did not invent either of those things, they sure as shit perfected them. The Greek culture, which we are going to discuss, did not develop in a vacuum. The Babylonians of Mesopotamia influenced greatly, not only Homer's famous epic poems, which still torture high school students in literature classes worldwide, but also brought the Greeks astronomy. Currency was brought by the Lydians, the Egyptians taught them advanced sculpting techniques, and, of course, the Phoenicians must be mentioned. I discussed in the last video how the Phoenician alphabet would later evolve into the Latin alphabet that we use today. But this alphabet spread to the Romans by way of Greece, who improved upon the Phoenician script. The original alphabet only had symbols for consonants, and the Greeks did a big brain think and decided to add vowels. Dad, what if our alphabet, worked good, and we had an equivalent symbol for every sound we made? My son, you're a genius! Leave it to the youth to look upon society with fresh eyes. And what if we had sex with women and not just men? Give me one reason why we should. They're soft and they smell nice. No son of mine is straight. What should be understood is that the Greeks absorbed the greatest aspects of their neighbors and developed their own culture, which they would spread throughout the Mediterranean via colonies. Some of these colonies were in the south of Italy, and these Greek colonies were called, by a group of barbarians in the middle of Italy, Magna Graecia, or Greater Greece. These barbarians hailed from the Kingdom of Rome. Rome was, during Greece's initial colonization of the Italian peninsula, a few hills with a chief, like 10 dudes, and, maybe a woman they all shared between themselves, because the past was about as fun for women as a Chuck E. Cheese ball pit filled with Ayn Rand novels. I'm exaggerating, but Rome, it simply did not matter. It was a civilizational backwater, far from the rich and ancient cultures of the Near East, which developed much more quickly due to their proximity to the ancient river valley civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia. The reason this video took so long to make is not just my spray paint addiction, which has come back with a vengeance, but rather the fact that to understand the long and complex relationship between Greece and Rome, we need to go back to both of their very origins. There were really 3 phases to Rome as they pertain to this series. I fucking love drawing maps and then like barely using them because I forget what's in my own fucking script. First, we have the Kingdom of Rome. Gonna need another. Probably shouldn't be gargling energy drink. First, we have the Kingdom of Rome, which lasted from around 750 BC to 509 BC. Next, we have the Roman Republic, which lasted from, well, 509 BC to 27 BC. And it was the coolest and most interesting period, and anyone that says otherwise is a hipster who pretends to like the kingdom, or a Warhammer 40k fan who likes the Roman Empire because for some reason the Roman Empire kept referencing their fucking game. And finally, we have the Empire, which lasted from 27 BC to 476 AD, and is mostly only good for wacky stories of shit the various emperors got up to, which, don't worry, we will get into. But, you know, when the human brain is granted absolute power, it melts into madness. That's just what happened. I could feel it happen to me when I hit 300 subscribers. Whoa. Slow down there. I see you're starting to scroll down to the comment section, because you feel like you got a big dick, and you're about to bring the Byzantines into this. You don't bring the Byzantines into this. I bring the Byzantines into this later. Trust me, I am very experienced when it comes to long, unhinged rants on the life of the Roman Empire, Republic, and Kingdom and all that shit, alright? If you bring up the Byzantine Empire now, you're gonna scare away the hoes. It's my job to scare away the hoes. And I'm gonna do it later. Rome was a civilizational backwater when this story begins, and Greece was frankly not much better for a very long time. Greece, from the Bronze Age up until around 300 BC, was nothing. A culturally rich but disconnected group of city-states which were destined to remain on their little peninsula and their fucking islands with their sparse colonies, warring against each other, and occasionally Persia, until the end of time. Oh, what's this? It's King Philip of Macedon with a steel chair! King Philip II of Macedon. Alright, it's time to make the map again. I'm just gonna make another map so I can fucking erase it later. This is supposed to be Greece. Greece is really hard to draw. King Philip II of Macedon was a hard-ass. But was Macedon actually another Greek city-state, or a city-state which simply bordered the Greek city-states? That's a great question. Let me know once you figure out the answer, fuckface. Instead of building an army of poor people, poorly trained and armed, Philip assembled a professional, well-trained standing army. He also pioneered the phalanx, a almost unbreakable formation, provided a war elephant does not look in its general direction. But Philip, after conquering the Greek peninsula and getting Athens and Sparta to stop slap-fighting each other over who was gayest, met an untimely death. Assassinated, according to Aristotle. But King Philip II would be succeeded by his son, whose name was Alexander, and he made the world Greek. Alexander had a cultural outlook that in many ways was Greek. He staged Greek athletic contests for the army. He had Greek philosophers in tow. He kept a copy of Homer under his pillow, supposedly. Some scholars question this anecdote, which indeed does sound too good to be true. This unlikely thing supports my argument, so it therefore happened. Kill yourself. Alexander conquered Persia, liberated Egypt, before putting it under new management, and continued all the way to modern-day India. Alexander had a plan, a grand plan. He was to conquer all there was to conquer on the way to the sea, which the Greeks believed encircled the world. We're done. Done what? Conquering. It's all hot and shit here, and we keep seeing more and more of those big gray monsters with the dick noses. I want to go home to my farm. No, there's stuff out here that I still don't own. Could you imagine not owning everything? I am literally a slave. Yeah, we're done. Following a mutiny, Alexander went to the formerly Persian city of Persepolis, where he attempted to administer his new empire, which was still not big enough to impress fat chicks on Tinder. Listen, don't fucking right swipe on me, unless you're over 6 feet tall and have brought war to the Persians. Trust me, I'm worth it, sweetie. I give unenthusiastic handjobs once a month. Alexander, in an attempt to better administer his new empire, dressed like a Persian king, asked that he be treated as a living god, which was also their custom, and even enjoyed hunting in the Persian style, which I assume is like, it's like normal hunting, but the things you're hunting are just those meat cylinders that are fucking delicious. I don't know what's in them. Alexander died shortly after of an unknown illness, he probably caught it from one of those fat chicks on Tinder. While Alexander tried to integrate himself into the peoples he had conquered by adopting their customs, the world he left behind was one ruled by Greeks, who would not do that. Except for in Egypt, because Egypt is fucking cool. Like, if you became the king of Egypt, you're dressing like this, right? Like, it takes every cell of my being, trying to stop me from dressing like that now. I want to wear this shit to Walmart. The successor kingdoms, as they are called today, were the result of Alexander leaving behind a far too large and still largely unstable empire. His former generals would take power in these places. These generals were, culturally certainly, Greek. By now, Greekness had long ceased to be a monopoly of ethnic Greeks. It had become a marker of a type of cultural civilization attractive to non-Greeks as well. As it turned out, in historical terms, the Romans would be by far the most significant of the non-Greek peoples who succumbed to the allure of Greek cultural achievements. The greatest discovery that ever came to the fine art of being racist was DNA and evolution. It led to a type of more advanced racism that we enjoy today. Why is my race better than yours? Evolution? Skull shape? You know, things like that. These sort of genetic realities that are just sort of hardwired into DNA. In ancient times, people were still very prejudiced and tribal, obviously, but it was culture that was the center of prejudice. Whether or not you were born in Greece did not matter. If you spoke Greek, if you worked out in a gymnasium, if you enjoyed Greek architecture and poems and plays and sculpture and bussy, you were Greek. Later, when the ancient Romans conquered, everything, the way they would assimilate conquered territory into the empire as a whole was by getting the conquered ruling class of people to dress and speak and act Roman. Get a barbarian, slap him into a toga, now he's Roman. This Romanness would then spread to the lower classes over time. This is what happened with Alexander's successor kingdoms. This time period in the Mediterranean, between the death of Alexander to Cleopatra, is referred to now as the Hellenistic period. And you're going to hear variations of that word a lot throughout this video. Hellenic is Greek. Philhellene, which I'm definitely mispronouncing, go down in the comment section, let me know, is a lover of Greek culture. And Hellenized means you have adopted Greek culture. It was on a Greek stage that Rome rose, and the story of the two peoples would become one and the same. After Alexander's death, the successor kingdoms spent most of their time waging war with one another. Nothing came of these endless wars. However, time passed, and a great king in general, forged by these endless wars among Alexander's successors, would eventually be compelled to turn his attention to Rome. His name was Pyrrhus, and he nearly broke Rome before Rome had risen. As Rome grew in size, they eventually began encroaching upon the Greek colonies of Magna Graecia. After some minor fighting around the Greek city of Tarentum, Pyrrhus landed in Italy with around 25,000 troops and a presumably far too visible erection. It happens. But he was clearly not even trying to hide it. So everyone was very uncomfortable. Before even more troops landed, a Roman consul took an army to engage Pyrrhus. And prior to engaging the Romans, Pyrrhus went with a friend to scout the Roman camp. And Pyrrhus said, "They're well organized and well armed. I expected a horde of barbarians, but this is an army of men. All appearances, I'm sure. They'll break before the phalanx, as all savages do. These don't look like barbarians to me. We'll see what they can do soon." The first battle of the Pyrrhic War, now called the Battle of Heraclea, was a victory for Pyrrhus, but a difficult one. Following his victory, he sent peace terms to the Romans, to which they responded, politely but firmly, "Blow it out your ass, you Greek twink fuck." It is here, in this war, that you can observe Rome's complicated military tactics.
It was simply a matter of outsmarting them. Killbots have a preset kill limit. Knowing their weakness, I sent wave after wave of my own men at them, until they reached their limit and shut down.
Rome's ability to call up, train, and arm troops quickly was always their greatest power. While the Macedonian phalanx was unbreakable, so too was the Roman spirit. The Pyrrhic War was brutal. Pyrrhus of Epirot would bear down on the Romans with phalanxes and war elephants, and much more often than not, he would win, but always at an unimaginable cost. Pyrrhus won every battle, but was losing the war, which is also from where we get the term Pyrrhic victory, which is a victory which comes at an unsustainably high cost. As Pyrrhus's army dwindled and the Romans showed no signs of breaking, he left the Italian peninsula, his great plan having been stopped by some Italian barbarians, and also Carthage. Carthage helped, they took some time from their baby sacrifices. What Pyrrhus did not know was that he had stretched Rome to its breaking point. For years after, they would continue to live in fear of Alexander's successor kingdoms, their war elephants, the world-conquering phalanx, and what would happen if they turned their attention from fighting each other and towards Rome. But it was not the successor kingdoms which would be Rome's greatest rival during the middle of their time as a republic, but instead Carthage. And it was during the Second Punic War that Rome would once again square off against Alexander the Great's shadow. As Hannibal Barca inflicted defeat after defeat on the Romans in the Second Punic War, his main goal was to weaken Rome's relationship with her allies. This was never as effective as Hannibal hoped, but there was a small successor kingdom who he managed to convince to support him instead of Rome, after the slaughter at the Battle of Cannae. This successor kingdom was the city of... You've been taking notes this whole time, right? Right? This successor kingdom was the city of Syracuse. The Romans, incensed by these turncoats, laid siege to the city, and it was a bloodbath. The defenses at Syracuse were unlike any the Romans had seen before. The defenses at Syracuse were not simple, they were sort of one of a kind, because they were the work of the Hellenistic mind, the work of educated Greeks, specifically one educated Greek, Archimedes. Archimedes' defense of Syracuse, for the Syracusans were but the body commanded by his mind, remarks Plutarch, is a testament to the ingenuity of the Hellenistic mind. The abstract ideas of geometry and mechanics dreamed up by the geniuses in Alexandria found terrifying expression in the works of Archimedes. The Romans perceived the more intellectual Greeks as somewhat impractical and up their own ass, in contrast to themselves, of course, who they considered grounded and practical. But Archimedes' defenses showed to the Romans that advanced geometry and the financing of classical antiquity mad scientists by the government can bear bloody fruits. Archimedes was the close friend of the king of Syracuse, and is arguably one of the greatest mathematicians and inventors of the ancient world. He learned how to measure the volume of an object that's an irregular shape, designed the largest ship in classical antiquity, created a giant claw Syracuse's defenders would use to sink ships, and also invented a motherfucking death ray. The Romans were stunned by Syracuse, not only by the complexity of its defenses, but also by the beauty of the city itself, which caused the man commanding the Romans there, Claudius Marcellus, to weep. Unable to take the city by force due to the absolute fucking death trap Archimedes had turned it into, the Romans stuck in during a festival and took the city by subterfuge. They found Archimedes in his room, studying circles he'd drawn in the sand on his floor. Archimedes, I'm busy. Speak to the slave outside. He wouldn't let me in, so I killed him. Well, you must have something important to say then, I hope. What is it? We've taken the city. Commander Claudius Marcellus has demanded your presence. You've killed a lot of good Romans with your death traps. Well, they can't have been that good, then. Leave me to my circles, Roman. One major effect of the sack of Syracuse came with the booty, which eventually found its way back to Rome. The Romans compared the beauty and sophistication of Hellenistic sculpture with their own crude efforts, and observed many of the slaves they brought back were more educated than the aristocrats who had captured them. From this time forward, there was a growing Hellenistic movement in Rome. Admiration of Greece, its language, and culture began to take hold among the Roman aristocracy, and this trend continued to accelerate right into the imperial period. To show how the Romans became Greek, we must first define what is a Roman. Romans took pride in their bluntness, believing subtlety to be the mark of a beating around the bush type, baby back bitch. They considered art, music, poetry, and theater to be fine. Like, watching and enjoying those things it's totally okay. But a good Roman does not spend all their time obsessing about art. A good Roman does not create art. A good Roman builds aqueducts and perpetuates arguable genocides. In the aftermath of the Third Punic War, just a few generations after the sack of Syracuse, Scipio Africanus, as discussed in Part 1, link, was a war hero that was horribly mistreated by the Roman political establishment. But why? Why would they treat a war hero like that? Well, he was a Philhellene. Obsession with Greek culture was un-Roman. Holy shit, I fucking caught it. Line up, ladies. Obsession with Greek culture was un-Roman in the days of the Roman Republic. It was fruity nonsense. But as Republic turned to empire, the Hellenic culture would pervade the very heights of the political and wealthy classes. This would continue for a time. Upper-class Romans would indulge themselves in Greek pursuits, such as music and poetry. Then some conservative Roman would look up from their aqueduct construction and say, wow, that's gay. But, of course, this all came to a head with... I'm beginning to think I should throw away the shoe and buy an actual eraser. I'm sorry if this is hard to see. Nero.
Legend says that as Rome burned, Nero sat on his balcony, singing the fall of Troy, with the city suffering as his backdrop.
We all know the story of Emperor Nero fiddling while Rome burned. A classic, if certainly untrue story, which reads to modern audiences like, the wealthy and powerful, in this case the emperor, like they're disconnected from the struggle of the common man. Imperator! A fire is consuming the very heart of the city. The plebeians need help. A fire? Don't those normally end up going out at some point? Anyway, here's Wonderwall. This is not how a Roman would perceive that story. But first we need to establish that the fiddle did not exist yet. However, Nero was very fond of an instrument called a lyre, which was associated with Greece. Now, this story, and do bear in mind it is just a story, would have been perceived very differently to a Roman in the early empire than it is to us now. Now, this was also a rumor that was spread at the time by the Roman citizenry. So a person playing an instrument in modern America is viewed as generally a good thing, a skill honed through dedication, a tool for self-expression. The most skilled musicians are venerated, and even those just starting out and trying to learn how to play Smoke on the Water are looked upon favorably, as they are devoting themselves to a very noble and very human pursuit: art. And as I've sort of discussed, that was not how Romans perceived art or artists at this time. An actor was the same level of social status as a prostitute or a YouTuber. During the time of Nero, when Rome had been the great cultural exchange center, the exciting cosmopolis of the entire Mediterranean world for nearly 200 years, and Greece had long been reduced to a Roman province, many Romans in the elites still labored under an illusion. They were at heart, ran their self-serving myth, a people of tough, sturdy, self-relied, peasant soldiers who, through grit, determination, fortitude, and discipline, had forged their brilliant empire. Yes, the Greek arts were good for education, perhaps even for relaxation too, but devotion to them would only lead to the breakdown of the moral fiber of Rome, turning a nation of soldiers into one of cowards, gymnasts, and homosexuals. That sounds like a good time. To create art was fruity and decadent and self-obsessed. The rumor of Nero playing the lyre while Rome burned was a natural extension of the public's perception of him as a self-indulgent, head-up-his-ass artist. It was not the pursuits themselves that were the problem. It was rather that Nero was dangerously close to achieving the standard of a professional performer. And in the conservative circles of Roman high society of the day, that just would not do. He built a school for the Greek arts and a gymnasium, like what a gay would do. He staged a talent show, which he performed in front of the whole city. This might shock you, but he won. Nero would go on to spend his rule touring the famed cities of Greece, which he adored so, while his empire was ruled by a former slave. The modern equivalent of an American president fucking off to Japan to tour anime studios and trying to write a manga while there was a civil war. A civil war happened. Nero was viewed as so effeminate by the Romans that a rumor circulated that Nero had gone out to face the rebels alone on the battlefield, not to fight them, but so he could show them his tears in hopes they would surrender. Nero would eventually be trapped in his country villa by an angry mob, after being abandoned by most of his friends and allies, his final moments being spent instructing his friends how to cry at his funeral. His last words were, "What an artist dies with me." What a fruitcake. The series is sort of both very easy to write and also very hard to write because I have to rely on what a lot of people said around the time of these events. Like, there's no archaeological evidence that Nero was that theater kid everyone fucking hates, right? But this is what people said at the time, or at least after his death. Are these stories also exaggerated? Well, almost definitely. Nero could have just liked playing the lyre a bit. But if that is the case, if these are wild exaggerations or just outright fabrications, then these are the sort of fabrications and exaggerations that Romans in the early days of the empire would spread about a man that just liked playing Greek music and acting in the occasional play. Nero was, in truth, just another part of the trend that had started long before his birth, and would continue long after his rule. Greek culture, slowly but surely, achieved a stranglehold on Rome, with older Roman ideals being washed away beneath a tide of olive oil and pussy. I should probably buy an actual eraser. You will often see people nowadays blaming softness for Rome's fall. But that's obviously very, how do you measure that? But more importantly, like, who started that? Who's like, why exactly do we say that? Where do these accusations of softness come from? Romans. From the speeches of Cato to the 16 satires of Juvenal, you will never struggle to find a true Roman decrying Eastern, particularly Greek, influence as some sinister, rotting agent of the empire. This is sort of wild. This is an ancient political talking point, but we still bring it out as a fact. That's like the green M&M becoming less sexy, being declared the reason for the fall of America in history classes in the nuclear wasteland 1,000 years from now. Throughout Rome's existence, there was a series of recurring problems that never really went away. The biggest of these being the fact that the laws of succession were never really established, which led to constant civil wars And there was also, of course, the fact that Rome was big. Too big, I believe the kids these days call it a hecking chonker, and it could not be managed by a single man efficiently. In 293 AD, Emperor Diocletian had a novel solution to both of these problems. The Tetrarchy was a new means of dividing and ruling the empire, designed to cease the constant and brutal civil wars which ravaged the Roman Empire during really the entirety of its existence. But it was primarily made in response to the crisis of the 3rd century. The Tetrarchy meant to achieve this by dividing the empire into 4 segments ruled by Augusti, the senior emperors, and Caesares, their designated future successors. This system, and this might shock you, just caused a bunch of different civil wars, and due to this was hardly a stable and consistent system of government. However, to quote, of course, the great emperor Octavian, "Consistent and transparent systems of government are for pussies who don't win every civil war." What the Tetrarchy did accomplish, however, was popularizing the concept of 2 or more emperors co-ruling, and while the system did not avoid conflict, it did end up allowing for something rather extraordinary. It created the possibility for the Roman Empire to continue to exist without the city of Rome. Much like how there is a South and North cultural divide in America, there was an East and West cultural divide in Rome. The eastern half spoke Greek, the West Latin. After the rule of Constantine, the capital of the West would be Rome, and the East would become Constantinople. So, before we go on, I just want to say, there's one secret to happiness, and that is dropping every book about ancient Rome at about the 3/4 mark. They considered themselves on both sides Roman. However, the West was always poorer, and always suffering barbarian invasions, until Rome itself was sacked by Alaric, king of the Visigoths. The West collapsed, and many say that this was the end of the Roman Empire. But the East did not collapse. It survived for another 1,000 years, the entirety of the Middle Ages. While the former western half of the empire was really spending all its time during the Middle Ages fucking sheep and, catching the plague from the Shussi, the East continued to exist and continued to be a major power for a while. Did Rome fall because it became soft? It was argued by the more socially conservative Romans that it was Greek influence that made Rome soft, but the culturally Greek half of the empire stood for a millennia longer than Rome itself. Alexander the Great, a man who, even if he wasn't Greek, was culturally very Greek, conquered the world and spread his Greek ideals through it. The fact is that Greek dominance of the Mediterranean certainly doesn't seem like something a soft culture or people would be capable of. In the Pyrrhic War, Rome almost collapsed. In the siege of Syracuse, the Romans had to take the city by sneaking in during a festival. And of course, the Romans did conquer the Greek peninsula, but the Greeks conquered Rome in turn, overpowering their culture with their own, and in the end, kept the flame of Rome burning in the east during the dark ages of the west. In fact, when the last city of Rome, Constantinople, fell in 1453 to the Ottoman Empire, many Greek artists and intellectuals left to Italy, fleeing the Ottoman advance. Many modern scholars also agree that the exodus of Greeks to Italy as a result of the fall of Constantinople marked the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance. To be clear, the Italian Renaissance had started somewhat prior, but this influx helped spurn the flourishing of art, science, and the humanities. It was also the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, which we now call the Byzantine Empire, that spurred Columbus to sail west, find some brown people, and do things that YouTube does not want me to talk about, because YouTube, frankly, thinks Columbus was a great guy and does not want to have his name slandered. The fall of Constantinople was not just the fall of the last Roman city, but was also the fall of an incredibly Greek city. It was a monumental event, which has inexorably shaped our world today. So, the point is, in a city which was once called Constantinople, but is now called Istanbul, there's a statue of the Roman Emperor Hadrian. He is standing, triumphantly, upon the back of a man. The story of this statue is written in the clothing of the subjects, the time in which it was created, and of course the subject of the piece. We have covered Caesar's struggles against the Celts and the long, brutal Punic Wars, and of course now the Pyrrhic War, but this statue was made in a very different time, a time where that Rome now lived only in history books. This was a Rome unchallenged and supreme. Emperor Hadrian, the subject of this statue, was the successor to Trajan, another exceptionally good emperor who gave the Parthians what they had coming to them. Now, Hadrian was born in Spain to a Latin family, but loved all things Greek. Now, most people would not describe Hadrian as effeminate. He was actually very tough. He liked drinking and associating with the common soldier. He also, at least from my reading of him, seemed to have that sort of quiet, confident masculinity. He actually abandoned much of his predecessor's conquests, and his reign would be one not of largening the empire, but instead strengthening it. This strengthening took many forms, from the aforementioned abandoning of frankly difficult to defend conquests, to the building of Hadrian's Wall, which was of course designed to keep out the godless Celts, to of course putting down the Jewish rebellion with the fury of 1,000 fucking suns. Those Jews. If God had truly given you the land of Judea, then you wouldn't be failing all these rebellions, now would you? Stop cutting the tips off your dicks and pay your goddamn taxes. But Hadrian had many passion projects beyond crucifying Jews and bolstering borders. He wanted Athens to be the cultural capital of Rome. So strong was his appreciation of all things Hellenic. You want to know how Greek Hadrian was? He had a relationship with an underaged femboy. If that's not Greek, I don't know what is. Hadrian financed the building of many great temples in Athens, as well as creating funds to sponsor great athletic games, as the Greeks were famous for. Really, all of our modern politicians just can't hold a candle to Hadrian, because his passion showed through in his work, and he was openly a pedophile. I'm going to get out of my lane here. This is crazy speculation, and I can't support it with anything, but please hear me out. How did Rome fall? Who gives a shit? Like, everyone's always asking this. But it's not interesting. How did it fall? Of course it fell. What fascinates me is how it stood. Because it just doesn't make sense. A republic with no naval tradition and little in the way of culture, over the course of centuries, went on to establish and maintain a massive, 3-continent-spanning maritime empire for the better part of a millennium. Why did Rome fall? Because it's all of those things that I just said it is. Those things are fucking insane. You will find that the nature of empire is unsustainable, inherently. People can tolerate a great many things, but they will not tolerate being ruled by an ethnic group that is not them in perpetuity. Hence all those Jewish rebellions. Of course they rebelled. They were being ruled by a people living on another continent, which had wildly different values. How long would you accept being ruled by Muslims? I don't mean like there's a Muslim president. I mean rule by a guy that dresses like this, has 3 wives, thinks gays were invented by the Jews, and thinks women need to cover their whore faces. Rule by foreign Muslims who, enforce Sharia law. Like, I'm talking like if somehow the Saudi royal family took over America. Like, whether you want to admit it or not, you would tolerate that. You may say you wouldn't, but history shows that you would. But you would only tolerate it as long as you believed you had to. This is also why every American war in the Middle East is unethical and fucking stupid. I don't get why it's so hard. Leave them alone and let them suffer through their dark ages in peace. We all go through them sometimes. Or you can admit, that you just wanted blood after 9/11. I really fucking hate the war on terror. And really, I feel like you should too. Congratulations, you have been liberated, and now get to enjoy American values, which I'm sure excites you greatly. Now your women have rights, it is legal to do butt stuff, and you are now going to participate in global free trade. While I understand that all these things I've said directly oppose everything you were raised to believe is right, you now get to enjoy McDonald's hamburgers. McDonald's, I'm loving it. So, I'm going to leave now, and when I do, I want you to protect the freedoms which I have so generously given you, and which you definitely want. If you are very good and do lots of capitalisms and freedoms, you will be rewarded with the McRib. So, are there any questions? Yes, you with the sad eyes. What happened to my dad? We killed him. Empires are both a reflection of human nature and exist in conflict with it. They reflect our desire to control and to create these big borders, but the people within these borders are, not having a good time. They will, at their first opportunity, attempt to escape the empire and be ruled by their own people, as they are often compelled to live within legal and economic systems which they did not build, and which often exploit or disempower them. While working on this video, I do believe I learned a little bit about how Rome managed to exist for as long as it did, and indeed why the more Greek half of the empire lasted longer than the western half. The Hellenistic foundation, which was laid by Alexander's conquest and the successor kingdoms which followed, served as a shared cultural heritage, which acted as something of a social glue. It is my belief, based on nothing but this funny tingling sensation in my balls, that Hadrian sought to strengthen this Hellenistic heritage by trying to restore the city of Athens to its former glory, as he was, first and foremost, a man seeking to strengthen the empire. And as a Philhellene, he saw the cities of Greece and the culture which they had spread all across the Mediterranean as a shared cultural bedrock upon which the Roman Empire stood. Cat, you stop that. I won't have it. So let's go back to the statue. The man beneath Hadrian's foot is wearing pants, an article of clothing associated with those which lived in Europe north of the Mediterranean, and therefore primitive peoples. A barbarian. Hadrian, however, is wearing armor and a skirt, and on his cuirass, the breastplate, fuck it, you can see a she-wolf nursing 2 infants. Romulus and Remus, the founders of the city of Rome, if only in legend. This makes sense on an obvious surface level, and doesn't really invite any deeper thought. The first citizen, the Imperator, the state made flesh, standing on the back of a vanquished and barbaric enemy, all while wearing the mythical founders of the eternal city, Rome, on his chest. It's... it's pretty straight fucking forward. It's a statue which speaks simply, for all it speaks of, is strength. It's a brutal piece of propaganda, intended to project power, a statement of intent and destiny. This is where we belong. This is where they belong. But there's one thing odd here. Just above the she-wolf and the infants is Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, symbol of, you guessed it, the city of Athens. It's a peculiar inclusion, particularly when you consider the winged victories which encircle her. The goddess of victory, encircling not the founders of Rome, but the symbol of Athens. Was this video fucking stupid? It's a possibility we must consider. What did the Romans think of the Greeks? Countless things. Many, many things. Over the course of many, many years. In the end, the Romans were Greek. And the Greeks, in turn, were not only Roman, they were the last Romans. Thanks for watching.